Chapter 7. Horace reached the arguing group just inside the main door, and quickly quieted things down, reassuring the servants and guards that the Scandian was a friend, and not about to make a one-man attack on Castle Redmont. Will watched as the tall warrior spoke quickly to Svengal, then led him away into a side room. As they went, Horace turned, caught Will's eye, and made an unmistakable gesture for him to join them. Gradually, people in the hall relaxed as it became apparent that the incident had been removed, and there was no immediate danger. The orchestra, which had tailed off at Svengal's appearance, picked up the melody once more and eyes returned to the bridal couple. Will saw Halt and Lady Pauline had paused where they were, standing motionless in the middle of the dance floor. He crossed to them quickly. "Finish the dance," he said quietly. "I'll take care of it." Halt nodded his gratitude. The last thing he wanted was any kind of disturbance to Lady Pauline's special day. "Find out what he wants," he said. Will grinned. "Maybe he's brought you a wedding present." Halt jerked his head toward the back of the room. "Get going," he said. Will grinned again and turned away, taking Alice's hand as he passed. "Come on," he said, leading her off the dance floor with him. He glanced up to catch Gillen's inquiring look as the tall ranger led Jenny down from the dais. Will jerked his head toward Halt and Pauline and mouthed the words, "Keep dancing." Gillen nodded. The less disruption of the normal run of events, the better, he realized. Pauline saw the quick exchange between the young rangers, then watched as Will picked his way through the tables, Alice accompanying him. She admired the speed of which they had reacted, the way he was taking over the situation. "He's growing up," she said to Halt, and they began to dance again. Gillen and Jenny now circled the floor with them as well. Then Duncan and Cassandra joined them, followed by the Baron and Lady Sandra. That was the signal for the other dancers to crowd into the floor. Within a few minutes, most people had forgotten that the travel-strained, wary Scandian had just crashed the wedding party. King Duncan steered his way toward Halt and Pauline, Cassandra moving lightly in time with him. "Halt, any idea what's going on?" he said at the corner of his mouth. "Will's finding out, Your Majesty," Halt replied, and the king nodded, satisfied. "Keep me informed," he said, and he and Cassandra circled away. They were replaced by Errol and Sandra, as the Baron plowed through the crowded dancers. Whereas Duncan and Cassandra had circled gracefully, Baron Errol took a direct route, rather like a purple, blue, and gold battle horse. Regrettably, Lady Sandra had never been able to pass the finer points of the dancer's art on to her husband. "Halt," he said as they approached. "Will's checking, sir," he said to him, and the Baron nodded. "Good. Keep me informed." He and his wife moved off. Halt glanced quizzically at his partner, having to look up slightly to do so. Pauline was tall for a woman. "As soon as I know anything myself," he said. As they reached the entrance hall, Alice stopped and turned Will toward her. "Perhaps I should go back to the table," she said. "This Svengal doesn't know me, and it might feel more comfortable talking if there are no strangers present." As a courier, her instincts for intrigue were finely honed, and Will sensed she was right. There was obviously something out of the ordinary going on. Svengal's abrupt appearance proved that. He nodded and briefly took her hand in both of his. "You could be right," he said. "Besides, it would look better if one of us was back at the party." He squeezed her hand, then released it. She smiled at him and turned, and slipped back through the crowded room. Will watched her go, then moved away to the small anteroom where Horace had taken their unexpected visitor. Svengal was slumped wearily on a bench as Will entered. "Will," the Scandian said, a tired smile, rising stiffly to shake hands. "Sorry to barge in at a time like this." Will glanced up at Horace. "What's going on?" he asked. From Svengal's downcast, weary manner, he gathered it was not good news. Horace shrugged. "I thought we'd wait for you. Save him saying everything twice." "What's going on out there?" He indicated the hall with a quick hand gesture. "It's all back to normal. You got things settled before too many people had the chance to notice. Good work." Horace made a small, self-deprecating gesture, and Will took another look at the Scandian. "You look just about done in, Svengal. Are you all right?" Svengal had slumped back onto the bench. He grinned ruefully, easing his aching back. "I've felt better," he said. "I've spent 2 days and most of last night on one of those blasted horses, all the way from Castle Araluen to here. I can hardly move my legs or back." "Araluen," Horace interrupted. "What are you doing there?" "We sailed Wolfwind up the same river we took last time. I thought it would be the best place to look for you all." Will and Horace exchanged glances. "I imagine you set a cat among the pigeons," Will said. There was a treaty in place between Araluen and Scandia, but even so, the unexpected sight of a wolf ship so far inland could only have caused alarm. "We flew Evelyn's pennant," Svengal told him. "We still had it in our flag locker. Is there anything to drink around here?" Will held his hands up in apology. "Sorry, you should probably use something to eat as well," he said. Svengal nodded several times. "Yes, that would be good too. Haven't eaten in a while." Will called a page who had been stationed outside the door. The young boy put his head around the door frame, staring curiously at the massive Scandian, who grinned at him. "Bring us some wine." "No, wait," he said as the boy began to dart away. The page turned. "Get us a plate of food as well. A big plate. A platter, in fact. Lots of good meat and bread. Don't worry about vegetables or greenery." He knew the Scandian's deep-seated contempt for salads as a food source. "Bring the wine in a flagon," Horace added, "not one of those dainty glasses you're using outside. And hurry!" "Yes, sirs," the page said. He raced away. "So tell us," Will said, "what brings you here in the middle of Halt's wedding?" Svengal shook his head in apology. "Didn't know about that," he told them. "We've been at sea for months now. We need help, and you were the only people we thought could give it." "We?" Horace asked. "Erak and me. Well, Erak, really. He told me to come here and find you, and Halt. So he's still in Hollisholm, I take it," Will said. He was aware that Erak had turned over his ship to Svengal when he assumed the office of Oberjarl. But Svengal shook his head. "He's in Aridia," he said. "He's been captured by the Aridi, and they're holding him ransom." "What?" Will's voice rose to a higher pitch than he'd intended. He paused and composed himself. "What the devil is he doing in Arida?" "We were raiding," Svengal explained. "He was bored with sitting around talking to Borsa all day." "I can imagine," Will put in. He still harbored resentment for the Scandian Hilfman who had assigned him to life as a slave in the yard, an almost certain death sentence in the bitter Scandian winter. "Get over it," Horace told him and jerked a thumb at Svengal. "Let's hear the story." But the page chose that moment to return with a platter loaded with chicken legs, pork chops, and a small mutton leg. There was also a tankard of wine on the tray that he set down. Svengal looked greedily at the food and drink. "Oh, go ahead," Horace told him. Svengal drank a third of the wine in one draught, then grabbed the mutton and tore off enough in his teeth to feed a small family. He chewed and swallowed for a few minutes, his eyes closed blissfully as the food and drink sent energy coursing through him. He was hungry, Will muttered. Svengal said he'd been riding for 2 days, not a popular way of traveling for Scandians. It was becoming obvious that he hadn't stopped to eat. The sea-wolf swallowed at last and took another gigantic gulp of wine. He wiped grease and wine from his whiskers with the back of one massive hand and let go a loud belch, loud enough to wake up the dead. "I take it he likes our food," Horace said. Will rolled his eyes impatiently. "Svengal," he said, "get on with it. How did Erak get himself captured? And how did you get away? What in God's name were you doing in Arida?" And Svengal held up a grease-smeared hand. "Hey, 2 or 3 questions at a time, all right? As I said, Erak was bored. He wanted to go to sea again, so he decided to go on one last raid. He paused, considering. Well, he said it would be his last, but I doubt it. I reckon. Get on with it, Will and Horace chorused together. Oh, yeah, sorry. Well, we planned a raid in Arita, Horace said incredulously, and Svengal regarded him, an injured look on his face. Yes, in Arita. After all, we're not allowed to raid here these days, are we? We have to go further afield. Will and Horace exchanged glances. I suppose that's our fault, Will said. Go on, Svengal. Anyway, we planned to hit a town called Al-Shabaab. It's a trading town where they provision ships, and we figured, well, Erak figured there'd be a lot of money there. You see, Svengal, Will said, I'm sure there were excellent reasons for raiding Al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab, Svengal corrected him, eyeing a chicken leg and reaching for it. But just get on with what happened, all right. Well, we landed before dawn, and everything seemed deserted. No guards, no lookouts. We made our way into the town and then realized they'd been waiting for us. There were over 100 troops in there. Frontline troops, too. Not the usual amateurs you find in those little towns. They were expecting us. They even knew that Erak was coming. They called him by his name. Knew he was Oberjarl. Said he was the only one they were interested in. Let me get this straight. They ambushed you. All of you. The entire ship's crew. Horace frowned at the thought. Svengal nodded. They let the rest of us go because they needed us to collect the ransom. They even returned our weapons once we were back on board. Said they didn't want us captured by pirates while we were fetching the money. He snorted in bitter amusement. Ironic, isn't it? How much is the ransom? Will asked. 80,000 reals, Svengal said. The two men whistled. That's a lot of silver, said Horace. Svengal shrugged. Erak is Oberjarl, after all. Will was frowning as he thought over what Svengal had said. There was something he didn't understand. Svengal, 80,000 is a lot of money, but surely Erak could put his hands on that amount. As you say, he is Oberjarl. Why did you come here for it? Erak told me to come here. It could take the better part of a year for us to get to Scandia and then back to Arita with the money. He tailed off. The thought not quite completed. Will nodded. That makes sense, he said. And I'm sure King Duncan will lend the money. After all, Erak saved his daughter's life. He sensed that Svengal had something else on his mind. Something he wanted to say, but was reluctant. But, he prompted, and the sea wolf sighed heavily. Erak didn't want me to go back to Scandia with the news that he was captive, he said. He was pretty sure that he was betrayed by one of our own people.